Now let's take it across the Chattahoochee River. I had one of you email me and say, you ought to use the Coosa River. That's a little more geographically correct in separating the East and the West. But the thing about it is, I didn't grow up on the Coosa River. I grew up on the Chattahoochee River. Plus, there are no songs that have ever hit #1 titled Way Down Yonder on the Coosa. I'm just saying. So let's get into this. SEC West now. Best and worst case updated. There is still an undefeated team in the SEC West, the Alabama Crimson Tide, familiar face there. And how about A&M? They were our #2 team in the West, and thus far, a long way to go, they still sit at 3-1 and #2. And then you got a really, really muddy situation after that, and a lot of you would argue that those standings are incorrect. And listen, Colin can only do what the league office tells him he can do. I mean, those are the official records. So officiating notwithstanding, that's what we have to go with right now. As for Alabama, preseason every year, the best case is undefeated for them, which is what mine was, 10-0. My worst case for them was 7-3. Marcelo and I both agree with our updated projection. Their best case remains 10-0. Their worst case is 8-2. We've bumped it up because they're past the Georgia game now. So all the offensive boxes have been checked. Mac Jones is everything you would hope he would be, and then some. Jalen Waddle's out. So if you're looking towards the worst case, if you're asking how could the 8-2 happen, well, you could have a bunch of COVID stuff happen. But outside of that, it could be that the Jalen Waddle hole is even bigger than you would think so, and maybe defensively they just never find themselves. Now, I happen to believe when you look at Tim Smith entering the game Saturday for them, which is a name I have been texting folks at Bama every week about, knowing what they lack on the interior so far this year. Hey, when in the world are we going to see Tim Smith? Saw him a little bit Saturday. Brian Branch, I think they'll be more versatile with him. He's a true freshman. Both of those guys are. But got to use them. I mean, that's talent. You got to use them. I think we'll start using them more. How about LSU? LSU, the preseason for us, as the Tigers sit 2-2, the preseason for us had LSU at 9-1, best case, 4-6, worst case. Marcelo has updated his projection, and his best case is 7-3, worst case is 3-7. I am a tick up on my worst case. I still have 7-3 as their updated best case, but I've got 4-6 as their worst case. I no longer see the trapdoor carrying them down all the way to 3-7. I think there's reason to believe, and this is, like I said, still to be determined, I think there's at least somewhat of an optimistic approach you could take here, and there's reason to believe that some rapid cohesion has begun to happen. We thought this may be the case. We thought they may show up week 1, not quite ready yet, or maybe not even close to being ready yet, just as an overall team. And if that were to happen, they were going to get embarrassed. But if that were to happen, there was also going to be a lot of people writing them off, only to find that, okay, well, it turns out they were ready by week 4 or week 5, whenever the case may be. Point being, hey, maybe that happened last week. Maybe we reached that tipping point last week. We'll see, because just as easily as you say that, you could also see them lose 37-20 Saturday. So at Auburn, we'll say a whole lot. Texas A&M, the current #2 in the West, they are 3-1 on the season. We have been high on this team. They keep losing wide receiver talent, but we've been high on them all year. We had them #2 in the West in our preseason. Preseason, I had them 9-1 best case, 5-5 worst case. Marcelo and I are still on the same page here. Nothing has changed. 9-1 is still the best case. 5-5 still the worst case. Love how they ended up going into the bye. They had the loss against Alabama. They rectified themselves and validated a lot of belief out there with the win against Florida. They avoided a potential landmine on the road at Mississippi State during the bye week. Well, now they come out of it. They, by the way, are our best bet Saturday. They opened as a 10-point favorite against Arkansas at home. That line has since moved to 12. That's why we gave it out early. So 7-3. Listen, they could go 7-3, guys, just by playing relatively mistake-free football. Like, they're going to have a roster advantage over most everyone they play the rest of the way. So that's what you're looking at. I mean, you're not looking for Kellen Mond to go on a Heisman run. You're just looking for him not to have a 1-touchdown, 3-interception stat line any given afternoon. How about Auburn? Auburn's playing LSU Saturday. Preseason on Auburn, we had 9-1 as the best case, and we had 4-6 as the worst case. They are 3-2 right now. Again, that's what the league record book says. Marcelo and I agree. Again, 7-3 best case for Auburn, the updated number, and 4-6 is the worst case. So The best case has obviously been knocked down a peg or two, but my worst case is still 4-6 for them. It is the highest variance team in America. That's what we thought about them in the preseason. How could you watch this year and think anything else? Even the officiating is high variance in Auburn games. So the offensive identity, it's been a question every Auburn fan's been asking, like, well, Chad Morris is coming in. Who are we going to be? What are we going to be? And then you played a couple of football games. You were still asking, who are we? What are we? Well, last week I was reading you those stats about the run-to-pass ratio. And we told you the reason we liked Auburn against Ole Miss is because I thought Gus Malzahn was either going to outright take a lot of that play calling duty back, or he was going to walk in and say, Chad, we're not throwing the ball this week. We got Tank Bigsby, true freshman's coming on. We got a limited offensive line. They can't stop molasses in December. Let's run the ball. And so they did. And for better or for worse, I think that's got to be their identity, which is really close to being in line with what they've always been. I mean, at their best, they've been run, they've been play action over the top. And it aggravates you that you don't have an intermediate passing game, but you'd rather not have one than try to have one and turn the ball over all the time. So I was looking at the rest of their schedule. Now, just as much as I said A&M is going to be at a roster advantage most of the rest of the way, Auburn has LSU at Alabama and Texas A&M left. Those are 3 out of their final 5 games where they will not have a roster advantage. Just something I like to throw out there. It's not like they'll be 4 touchdown underdogs, but just something to think about. And finally, we're talking about Arkansas. Why wouldn't we? Our preseason numbers were not pretty for Arkansas. 2-8 was what we had for best case. That was best case. 0-10 was worst case. They're 2-2 right now. Flat out should be 3-1. They are 2-2 right now. Marcelo has updated his numbers. He has 6-4 as best case and 2-8 as the worst case. I couldn't go above 500, and I love them, but I couldn't go above 500. 5-5 is my best case for them. 2-8 is my worst case. How much gas is left in the tank? That's the real question, because you got to love the effort you've seen so far. Guys, this is a long football season. Even when you're only playing 10 games, when they're all conference games, it's November seems like a year. And it's going to seem like a year. They have remaining on their schedule at Texas A&M, that's this week, Tennessee, at Florida, LSU, at Missouri, Alabama. So they're sitting 2 wins right now. I just flat out don't think they can win 4 of those games, even in the best of times. 3, maybe. 4, probably not. It's more realistic they're a 3 or 4 win team. That's why I'm telling you right now, freeze your opinion of Sam Pittman. Freeze your opinion of Kendall Briles, Barry Odom, the new culture there. Whatever you think about them now, that's great. That's great, and I don't care if they don't win another game. You need to freeze this opinion, and you need to just put it in a capsule somewhere. Do not let whatever happens the rest of the way. If it's positive, that's great. But if things go off the rails, just because they're not deep enough and talented enough to sustain an entire year, whatever. Nothing's going to erase the shine for me about what Sam Pittman has done there against literally all odds. We got to work in Phil Collins references every now and then, but against all odds, not the least of which being the SEC hitting them in the face with a bowling ball, scheduling-wise, and then saying, oh, by the way, once you are competitive in those games, we're taking the win from you. Sorry, woo pig. So 2-8 was the preseason best case. They're already a 2-win team, so congratulations there.